The first domino in what is probably going to be a massive 2025 Arizona basketball recruiting class falls for Tommy Lloyd. What is next?
You are Locked On Wildcats, your daily podcast on the Arizona Wildcats. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for listening to the Locked On Wildcats podcast. I'm your host, Mike Luke. This show is brought to you today by FanDuel. And again, place your first $5 bet and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. All right. Arizona basketball. We're going to talk a lot of recruiting on this show. Not only are we going to talk a lot of recruiting, we are also going to talk about where exactly things are with Arizona in the Big 12. There is a lot to like about this Arizona squad, but first we need to talk about some of the obvious things here, and that is Dwayne Aristode. This was a massive commitment for the University of Arizona, a guy out of Brewster Academy. Shout out Jack Murphy, by the way, on this one. Again, this is you look at Aristode's game, you look at his rankings, and it's very interesting because depending on where you look, he is Rivals has him at 8. Whereas 24/7 has him at 28. So let's just say somewhere in the middle, and he's 18. Either way, that's a 5-star kid. This was a very nice get, though, for Arizona because, after striking out on Nick Kamania, who I think they thought they had a real chance on, this was a nice little bounce back. And looking at Aristode's game, there's a lot to like. First, he's incredibly athletic. He's very bouncy as well, and he's got a body that was meant to play basketball. You look at him, and you can tell that his best games or his best game is in front of him. Now, listen, when it comes to skill, he's developing. I've always thought that when you look at him, when you look at his highlights, he's probably going to be a 2-year player, and with guys like that, I have absolutely no problem with that whatsoever. And I think that's something that you got to look at and be like, okay, cool. If you're an Arizona fan, I think you're more than okay. I think you're more than okay with that. And the way that he can, but he's going to force his way onto the court immediately, though, just because of how athletic and long he is. He's a pogo stick, and he is somebody that Arizona was recruiting for quite a while, and the fact that they were able to get him and they were kind of able to do it with not a lot of people knowing, not a lot of fanfare was very impressive. So again, massive shout out to Jack Murphy on this one, making this one happen, because I think a lot of people were bummed about where is, what's going on with Nick Kamania, why aren't there any commitments? And we've said this from day one. 2025 is the time that Arizona needs to strike when it comes to recruits. And and I stand by that. Tommy Lloyd's had enough time here to be able to really kind of get those connections going. He's got a recruiting staff that works tirelessly, and that's a big part of all of this. So again, getting Aristode in there is a very nice little move for this team, which also it's far from over though. And again, the next one is Koa Peat. I would expect at this stage, I think Koa Peat is going to decide early. It's just kind of a guess, but I have thought that he's going to decide early. And if he decides early, I think that that's very, very good news for the University of Arizona. Keep in mind, Boozer kids have already committed to Duke. They're not going to Miami, so that's one less team to worry about. You look at it like a Baylor and a Houston. That's something that obviously you might, they're in this one as well. But I think Arizona has done a very, very good job when it comes to this. And not only has Arizona done a really, really good job when it's come to this, he's the kind of guy that you prioritize. You want somebody like a Koa Peat on your roster because he's just going to be, he's probably only going to be in college for 1 year, but he is going to be physically overpowering in that 1 year. He's too big, and he's too and he's too mobile. And what's going to be interesting, though, is what exactly is his upside? Is he going to be somebody that, he's kind of maxed out and you're not sure how much better he could be? Or is he going to be like a Paolo Banchero that, he gets here and all of a sudden he shows that he can create off the dribble, that he can do a lot of different things? That's where I think it's going to be fascinating. I don't know where I stand on Koa Peat yet, but there's obviously a lot to like about his game, and I think that's going to be something that's going to be very, very, very enticing. So we'll see on that. But Arizona, they put in all the work, and for people asking, can they afford? Can they afford all these guys? Yep. I mean, this didn't sneak up on them, and that's something that I think you got to say that that didn't sneak up on. So you certainly got to put it at with that. I think the next thing is let's talk a little bit now about what he can bring to the table. And from a statistical perspective, I think he's going to be like a 15-7 guy, something like that, where and he gets particularly better. As the season goes on, and I think that's something that's going to be fair to say, but he's ready to rock and roll. And also, I'm just going to keep saying this. You've got to be able to get the kids in state that you prioritized. If a kid is indigenous to this state, you have got to be able to get him. And honestly, I think that is something that Arizona, should be able to do. I think that also the other thing too with Koa Peat is he's at the high school too that you've got to be able to get kids from. At this stage in the game, Gilbert Perry is where everybody is going, and Gilbert Perry is that's where everybody's going because word of mouth travels. And there's going to be another one up right after that. That's going to be Bruce Branch coming in here, and then after that, I do think that you're going to probably continue to see. You're going to continue to see even more. So we'll find that one out. It's going to be interesting, though, to see how this plays out. But this is the school that you got to be able to get in on. If you can get in on this, then I think you feel pretty good about where you stand in state. But again, with these kids, you've got to be able to get the in-state kids. If you get the in-state kids, then I think you feel pretty good about where things are. But again, you also can't lose anybody to ASU under no circumstances. If you prioritize a kid, he can't go to ASU. I always thought one of the most interesting recruitments ever was Daniel Bejarano by Sean Miller. This is a guy, keep in mind, that was committed to Texas from like 8th grade on up at Phoenix North, I believe. And he decommits from Texas, and Herb Sendek and everybody's thinking, well, he's going to go to ASU. And then Sean Miller, basically comes in after a week and is like, no, you're going to come here. He comes there. Again, in-state kids have to go here. And Koa Peat's been that one. Koa Peat, everybody's known who Koa Peat is for the longest time. This hasn't snuck up on anybody. And that's why I also think when it comes to NIL that people have to understand that Arizona is in a good spot right now when it comes to NIL. And I think that's obviously they're in a good spot. Now, again, you could always get more, but at the same time, you also know that you can get, I think that Arizona's doing all right. This isn't a situation like football where you're going against certain schools and you just have no capabilities. I think with basketball, Arizona can always do better, but they've got enough bag, as I think the kids say. And then, so again, like I said, Koa Peat has not snuck up on anybody. So if you're an Arizona fan and you're wondering how exactly that's going to play out, don't worry. That one is covered. They can afford both. It's just a matter of if they can get both or not. And I guess we'll find out where exactly that does stand. Now we're going to talk about Braden Burries here in just a second. And we're going to talk about the top 5, or we're going to talk about Arizona being the top 10 nationally, but being picked to finish 5th in the Big 12. But first, ROY. Hey, Wildcats fans, it's time to recognize the ROY Player of the Week. So far this season, we've pulled over $10,000 to support players for ROI. Micro deposits lead to massive change. With the ROI app, you can direct your support to the athletes you love, ensuring that all funds go to the specific player you choose. Unlike collectives, you know exactly where your support is going, and you even receive exclusive content like personal videos and updates after the season. Download ROI now and join the NIL game with no subscription and fees. And be sure to check us out on Instagram, Facebook, and X. ROI again _return on you for more information. Again, create an account right now. ROI, it's sweeping the nation. Thanks for keeping it locked on Wildcats and making this your first listen of the day. I am your host, Mike Luke. Okay, now let's talk a little bit about Braden Burries. That's the next one. Arizona has been all over Braden Burries, and they've been all over Braden Burries since basically his freshman year. Now, just to recall, Burries is very, very talented. He's going to most likely be a one and done. He can play in the. He can obviously play in the NBA. He's going to be he's a really, really, really good basketball player. He is, and again, Arizona's done a good job with him. I think when it comes to Tommy Lloyd in recruiting is that the longer a recruitment goes on without a real feel, that's when I generally get a little bit more concerned about it. Again, I would love for Arizona to be able to get Braden Burries. Shout out to Kenny Abbey doing good work on this one. But I don't have a good feel on. I don't know. And when I say it, don't have a good feel. I don't know where this one's going. This one could go a lot of different directions. I know UCLA's in there. Obviously, you got in North Carolina schools like that. But Burries is awesome. Now, if Arizona gets Jaden Bradley back, then Burries, you don't really worry as much about Burries because you already got Jaden Bradley. You already got a point guard in the mix. But that also, I think, is something that remains to be seen how exactly that does play out. We will see, though. But with Burries, though, like I said, the money is there. It's just can Arizona get him? But those are your priorities. If you can get Aristode, Peat, and Burries, you call that one a day and you run for the hills because you would have done a really good job. And that would be a nice little class. Now, you might say, what about, a big or something like that? I think Arizona's kind of at the stage with Emmanuel Stephen, who I don't believe is going to play this year. But I think with Stephen, they're saying, if he redshirts and he doesn't play a ton, but then the following year he's going to be ready to rock and roll. I could totally see that one. He's a good player. He's built, obviously, he's huge. He's got kind of that upper body thing going on, and I think that's what's a little bit interesting about all of this is that, he moves somewhat odd, but again, he's somebody that if he's patient, then he'll be good. But I get what Arizona's doing with him, though. They didn't bring in Xavier Staten. They couldn't promise him anything. So with Xavier, as far as playing time goes, so with Xavier Staten, you're like, okay, we already got Emmanuel Stephen, and Tommy Lloyd has shown one thing, that he is really, really good when it comes to the transfer portal, and that's something that you can always kind of hang your hat on. You know that your Arizona is going to do well in the transfer portal, and that's just something that I think that's just going to be the way that it's always going to kind of be. So there's obviously that. Now, as far as let's get to a little bit of where we're at now when it comes to, let's say, Big 12 play. Now, unless you've been living under a rock, you know that Arizona is preseason 10 in the country. That feels about right to me. I can see Arizona being a little bit better than that. I can see Arizona being a little bit worse than that. I'm not exactly sure which one it's going to be, but the Wildcats, they feel like they're somewhere around 10, but I think they obviously have Final Four potential at this stage. I think it's very difficult to look at this and say that they don't have Final Four potential. As a matter of fact, I'd be stunned if they don't. Listen, we've gone over the roster, and we're going to go over the roster and the Big 12 here, but I think this is clearly Tommy Lloyd's toughest team that he's had here, and I think that is a big I think that is a big part of all of this, is that you've got a tough team here, especially on the perimeter. You know what he brings to the table. Jaden Bradley, KJ Lewis, Caleb Love, all three of those dudes are tough. And that's what I think you need. You don't have anything like, a Kylan Boswell where you're just kind of wondering where exactly is your head during all of this or anything like that. That's kind of where I think that you look at and you're like, all right, this team, these guys are completely focused on everything. And I think that's obviously something that I think is very, very intriguing. Now, up front, there's obviously, I love Trey Townsend. I think Trey Townsend is an absolute stud. I think that he's a player that Arizona fans are going to like very, very quickly. He's going to be able to get points. He's going to be able to get buckets. And that's something that Arizona hasn't always had from that power forward position last year, as much as I liked him. Mo Krivas, if Mo Krivas is good to go, I think Arizona's going to be in really good shape. I like a walk off the bench. I like Anthony Del Orso as well. And I like Carter Bryant. I think that is a very solid 8-man rotation. I'll say this, Tommy Lloyd very much likes Henry Vasar. And he's probably going to continue to like Henry Vasar. So take that for what it's worth. So Henry's probably going to get a little bit of burn as well. Listen, and Lloyd also likes Conrad Martinez a great deal. I am not at all comfortable with Conrad Martinez out there on the court. If Arizona is playing good teams, that is not something that that is not something that thrills me, to put it mildly. So there's that. So I think when it comes to the backup point guard spot, you're probably looking at a KJ Lewis, looking at a Caleb Love, looking at, guys like that. Maybe an Anthony Del Orso. We'll see. Anthony Del Orso, though, by the way, was somebody that this coaching staff has been very, very impressed by. So that's going to be exciting to see exactly what happens. Now, with when it comes to the Big 12, listen, it's the most loaded basketball conference in the country by a mile. You got 5 teams in the preseason top 10, so let's talk about them a little bit. First, you got Kansas. Obviously, I think Kansas is clearly the best team in the country. You bring back Dickinson, who I'm not a huge fan of, but in college he's obviously very good. You got KJ Adams. Then you got Mayo. You've got AJ Storr. You got DeJuan Harris back. You've got a bunch of dudes off the bench as well. You got 5-star big as well. It's a very, very talented team. And, Bill Self and Danny Hurley, probably the 2 best coaches in the country right now. I think it's difficult to look at both those guys and say that there's anybody better or that there's anybody as good. I think that kind of goes without saying at this stage. So you got those guys. Then Houston after that. Houston to me is fascinating because Houston's obviously very, very good. Their defense is going to probably be amongst the best that college basketball's ever seen. My big problem with them and my big question will continue to be, how are they going to score? I just don't know how they're going to score. Because, listen, you struggled to score somewhat with Jamal Shed last year. You lose Jamal Shed, you bring in Milos Uzan. That's not a fair exchange when it comes to scoring the basketball. One of those dudes is a lot different than the other one. So, and you saw that against Duke when things started to slow down. They didn't have anybody that could score. I like LJ Cryer. LJ Cryer is a really good basketball player, but I also don't know that LJ Cryer is that dude that is going to be the one that's going to be able to make things different. I don't know that you're necessarily scared if that's your one really go-to guy. So Houston to me is really, really good, but I also worried with them about how they're going to score the basketball. I think everything game is going to probably be like 54-47, and that works a lot of the time. But if you're going against a team that can score, that can also be a little bit of an issue. So we will, I guess we'll see how that one plays out. But like I said, I'm not as sold on Houston as others. They're obviously a top 5 team, top 10 team, but I do have a few questions about them that I don't maybe have. Now, with Iowa State, they're fascinating because they have about as good a home court advantage as there is in the country. I believe Arizona is going to Iowa State this year. That is going to be a very, very – that's going to be a raucous environment. Iowa State returns everybody. They've got a very nice system in play at this point. So it's hard to sit there and say that that's a victory. And again, Iowa State, they've done a very nice job there. Then Baylor to me is kind of the wild card in all this. And it's hard to really sit there and say that you're a wild card when you're a top 10 preseason team in the country. But a lot of people have them as fourth in the Big 12, and I kind of think, taking my Arizona bias out of this, I kind of think that they're going to be the second best team. Big reason why is you've got the big man from Miami, who's obviously a stud. You've got him. Anybody that averages 18 and 10. I'll be honest with you, I didn't even know who he was, but anybody that averages 18 and 10 in a major conference is obviously a monster, especially in the ACC. Then after that, you bring in Jeremy Roach. You've also got, besides Jeremy Roach, you've also got VJ Edgecombe. You got Langston Love. VJ Edgecombe is the only guy besides Cooper Flagg who could maybe challenge that spot, because Edgecombe is an absolute monster. He is, you watch him, you can just tell that he's a lot different. And so I like that team a lot. Now, I think there's a question with Scott Drew, how much did losing Jerome Tang hurt? And I think that's a fair question. I don't know that we really know the answer to that one. So I think that's more than a fair question. But either way, this is a loaded roster. This is a team that should be very, very good. And it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. Now, there's other parts to the Big 12 schedule that I think we need to talk about when it comes to all this. And we're going to talk about that in just a second. But first, FanDuel, check it out. All right. Here's the deal with FanDuel. Visit FanDuel.com first. Now, here's the deal. Hey, NFL fans, you can get started this season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can go check out the live stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Again, NFL is here. We are in the middle of it. College basketball is here, almost here. NBA is right around the corner. College football, all the things that you want are here. So again, check it out at FanDuel.com. Thanks for keeping it locked on Wildcats and making this your first listen of the day. I am your host, Mike Luke. All right, now let's talk a little bit about where this team stands. Then the thing that you got to understand too with the Big 12 is that nothing is easy. Home court advantage in college basketball is such a massive, massive deal. And you just can't really, I don't think you can really put a price tag on that. I mean, heck, you look at Kansas last year, they went and lost at Central Florida. It is what it is. And you look around the Big 12, there's teams that you can absolutely lose to. Cincinnati is a top 20 team in the country. If you go into Cincinnati, that's going to be, for Arizona, that's going to probably be a 2-3 point spread game, something like that. You go into, there's other games like that. Texas Tech as well. You go into Texas Tech, it's going to be very similar. You're going to have a lot of different things going on that, I think will impact you because these are really good basketball programs. And when you got and these are still college kids. So when you got college kids going into these environments, it is what it is. And again, Arizona, it's a great thing that you're senior laden, that you got a lot of upperclassmen laden. How about that? But at the same time, there's also a reason that these dudes are still in college. It's not like they're that good. So, it kind of is what it is. But when I look at this schedule, when I look at this conference, the thing that I keep coming back to is if you're Arizona, I think that if you're Arizona, you want to do the Lute Olson thing where you protect home court and you split on the road. If you go 15-5, I think that you're absolutely okay with that. And I think that's something that you should probably embrace, actually. So that's kind of where I'm at with Arizona and just kind of what my expectations for this season are. That is, and I think that's more than fair, to be honest with you. I think that this should be a very good basketball team. I also don't know, though, that it's going to be, this is not going to be easy. And so, if Arizona finishes third in the conference, they can still get a 2 seed. I mean, that's how loaded this conference is. You generally don't see things like this. As a matter of fact, you've never seen it before. There's really no template for this, and I think that's why this is such an exciting adventure, because you don't know really what to expect. Factor in as well that Arizona's got Duke, Arizona's got Wisconsin, all kinds of games like that. It's going to be interesting. All right, now, tomorrow, we're going to get into the Arizona-Colorado prediction. What's going on there? We're going to try to separate fact from fiction with Deion Sanders. What does he bring to the table? Will he be there next year? There's going to be a lot of questions, I think, about, what's going on with Deion. One thing about it that you got to give him a lot of credit for is that he is he's loaded. He's gotten a lot more talent on that roster. I think the question is going to be, are you cool with it for 2 years when he leaves after the season and there's nothing left? That's where it's going to be fascinating for me. And I don't know that anybody really knows the answer for it. Listen, this is a game where Arizona's favored. It's going to be interesting to see how the Wildcats play. There's going to be a lot of interesting matchups here. So we will see all of that. But either way, that's going to be a big game, going to be a crossroads game, I think, for both teams. All right. But on that note, though, appreciate you keeping it locked on to Wildcats and making this your first listen of the day. We'll be back with you tomorrow, breaking down Arizona, Colorado, Deion Sanders, all of that stuff. Have a great rest of your day, though, and thanks for keeping it locked on Wildcats.